Welcome back to the Hop Time Brewery channel here. Today we are going to go through the Mango Wheat Ale that we mentioned in our previous episode. We're going to go through the kegging process today, and then later this episode we're going to do the taste testing. We're going to go through and compare the brew we made to the mango cart and a blind taste testing and kind of figure out the portfolio that comes with the flavor of our beer we made. But today we are doing the kegging process. So this has been in the fermenter for about 2 weeks now. We initially had it in the primary fermenter for about a week. We then transferred it off of the primary, took it off of the main yeast, brought it to this one from SS Brewtech, added the mango flavoring. We had the puree flavoring, about 3 pounds of mango flavoring that we added to the secondary fermenter. It's been sitting on that for about a week. The reason we did it in the secondary is to make sure we didn't eliminate all the sweet fruit smells that came with it and the flavor. A lot of people add it to the primary, and that can work as well, keeping it in a single fermenter and keeping it for that 2 weeks in a primary. However, we wanted to make sure those mango flavors really came out of that puree and the yeast didn't really eat away all the sweetness that was part of it. So today we are going to be transferring it from this to the keg. We have our keg down here. We'll be letting it chill down before we carbonate it. So typically anyone that are bottlers who don't do the kegging process, usually chill down that keg before you hit it with the CO2, as it can absorb more CO2 in that process. So we're gonna actually transfer it, we're gonna purge the keg of all the oxygen in it, and then we are going to put it into the kegerator. Make sure it's chilled, put on that CO2, let it sit for a couple days. We are gonna shake it up a little bit and force carb it. We typically do not take that time to wait. We wanna try this beer as soon as it's ready and put it on tap for others to try. So we'll let it chill down, put the pressure on it, force carb it, do a little roll in for about a minute or two, about the 15-20 PSI, and then from there we will try out the beer. So right now we're gonna go through the transfer process. So this keg has been sitting here. Right there. Okay, so we're going to take the star stand out of here. We're going to empty out the star stand, making sure everything's clean and sanitized. So as you can see in here, the star stand has been chilling inside the keg. It's all in there. So we're going to empty it into the bucket here. And it's fine if you keep all the foam in there, so there's still foam going on in the keg here. That is perfectly fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook up the tubing to transfer it. Typically, to be safe, we're always going to sanitize. So I always have a little spritzer bottle full of sanitizer that we will spray here. And brewing is always a lovely time. So make sure you are cleaning and have those rags available to clean up as well. So we are going to add the tube now. And again, the foam is fine. And we're going to slip it up on here. And we're going to try to get a nice fit on there and get it into the keg. So the one thing a lot of people do is they do the closed transfer. We haven't really gotten the system down yet to do a closed transfer. We're going to look to try to attach it to the in and the out and move it up here, but we'll work on that when we get to a New England to make sure we're reducing the oxidation that can come from it. But for now, we are just going to do a traditional transfer from the keg, from the fermenter to the keg, making sure everything's attached nice and snug. We're going to take the airlock out. One mistake people sometimes do is they forget the airlock, and guess what happens? You open this up, liquid drains down, and what's happening here? It needs to pull pressure in. You're pulling all that liquid from the airlock in. So make sure you pull that airlock out. You can set it to the side, put it in your star sand bucket. You no longer need it for this process anymore. So we're going to open that transfer process and let it transfer to the keg. And that's what it looks like inside of the fermenter here. So there is a good layer of the yeast that took over and did a little bit of vacuum fermentation in here. And it looks like we did end up with a little more than 5 gallons. You can see the 5-gallon mark right up here. So it looks like we had a little bit more than 5 gallons in here. So we're gonna end up with a little extra in the fermenter that we'll take the original gravity from. But let's check out what's happening down here in the keg. It looks like we're filling up nice and... You can see the star stand foam really starting to come up. You can see that light color coming out of there. It's actually very, very light. You might not be able to see it at all coming into the keg. So we'll get you a better color of it when we actually pull the gravity of it. So as we said for this beer, we actually took the grain bill and the primary before adding any of the mangoes and took a couple bottles off. So we have some bottles of just the grain bill. So that included the Centennial and Mosaic hops that we added to this and the grain bill. And that's pretty much it. Went through the fermentation process with the yeast we used. We actually used the Imperial juice strain. We tried to change it up a little bit. Even though this is a wheat ale, we kind of wanted that haziness that came with it. So we tried the juice strain. We've enjoyed the juice strains for some of our New Englands, so we had some extra left over. We started it up and used it. So we have just the bottle of it without the mango. So what we're gonna do for our taste test later on in this episode is we're gonna compare not only just this, which has been aging in the bottle now for about a week. We're gonna let it sit for a little bit longer, cold crash this and try this, but we're also gonna have a taste of the mango version of this and then the mango cart to compare it. So I don't know if anyone else has brewed with mango beers or brewed with the purees and know exactly how it's turned out for them. Put it down in the comments how that's worked for you. We'd like to hear that. So this is almost done transferring. We almost have about a full keg here. So we're gonna finish up the transfer process here. We'll be back with you, okay? Okay, so we have finished the process of transferring from the fermenter to the keg. We've closed the fermenter here. As you see, we did a little bit of a twisting to twist the tube inside there to make sure we get as much as we can while watching it, that we're not really pulling out all the yeast and all the sediment that's really settled at the bottom. And there's a good amount of it there, and we'll show you in a little bit what that'll look like. So we're gonna actually take the tube off here, and we're gonna make sure all that liquid goes down into it. We're gonna pull this tube out. And we don't need this anymore, so we're just gonna throw it in our bucket of Star Sand to get out of the way here. So what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna sanitize the rest of the stuff, sanitize the top, before we put it back into the keg, making sure that there's no possibility of infection on this beer. So that is completely closed, amazing. So we're gonna now move on to trying to get a gravity reading. So I'm gonna bring in, see how much we can pull for a gravity reading here. Okay, so if you actually look at this color here, we can kind of see it right here. The color of it, it's a very, very hazy color. It's very golden. It looks like that mango puree really gave it some nice colors to it, which was nice. It kind of made it more of a yellow tint, an orange tint, which hopefully over time it might clear up a little bit as the sediment falls. It looks like we got a good amount of sediment still in this one. This was pulled from the bottom of the fermenter, so it's a lot of sediment based in this reading here. But we actually ended up a lot sweeter. We wanted to. So let me give this a good read here. So it looks like we ended up at 10-12, 10-14. So for this beer, we started off lower. Our efficiency was very low on this. We made a lot of mistakes, and we'll kind of explain through in the process here. And we ended up with more sweeter notes at the end of the first fermentation. Before we transferred out of that primary at 10-20, which is very sweet. We didn't think it'd end up that high. We were kind of confused. It kind of goes back to how high our strike water was for our mash, causing that higher sweetness to come from it. So mistakes, we've learned from that, and we're noting them for our next brew. Adding the mango into this and now coming back down to 10-12, 10-14, that's amazing. That's a good number to be at for our beer. It still has nice residual sweetness to it, but at the same time, it still has that alcohol to it that we want to. Because we weren't aiming for a high alcoholic beer, but we're aiming for something that's more crushable and something that is a good sipper for the weather outside and something that you can relax and just drink in a casual night. So that's the end of the process here. What I really want to do now is I want to put some CO2, pressure this keg. So we are going to grab our CO2 tank line out of our kegerator here. So typically the way this process works is you're going to take the CO2 line and you're going to go into the in line. Yeah, connect the two there. And we got our CO2 put up to 10 psi right now, so we're going to keep it at the 10 because we're just kind of purging. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to let it fill, give it a little bit, we're going to release that and let it go again. And some stuff might come out. Some people typically use a towel for this process too, because you never know what's going to spurt out. We got a little bit of headroom left on the keg as well, so we don't need to worry about it too much. But we're going to keep going like this. We're going to try to get all the oxygen out there and fill a nice CO2 gap in there, so there's no oxidation happening in the beer. And if the beer wants to absorb something, it's going to be absorbing a CO2. So we've done this 3 times now. Put in the CO2. So we're just going to let this finish fill one time here. We're going to make room inside our kegerator here for the beer to go in. You know, when you store too much beer in the kegerator. So we're going to unhook this here. Make sure that that CO2 is full. We're going to take this and we're going to and we're going to leave the CO2 line on the keg as well, just to make sure it starts absorbing that. But as I said, we are going to close that up. We're going to be cold crashing this as well, so we're going to let it chill down, get to a nice serving temperature, and then we will purge it with a bunch of CO2. We will force carb it and then go from there. But I do want to show you what it looks like inside of the fermenter here, so let's take a look. You can actually still see there was some active yeast that really took its toll on the beer, but I think you could really get whiffs of the mango right now. You can really smell it happening in there. So this is a fermenter that we will really need to dive into and clean a little bit later. However, we are very excited how this beer turned out. In the end, we'll try a little bit of the sample here, but we are very excited for this mango and how it's going to turn out. We're going to do that blind taste test and compare the mango cart beer, as I mentioned before, to ours, to the original version of this grain bill. So we can adjust our strategy a little bit here. And as I said before, I want to hear how other people's fruit puree creations have turned out. We're looking at using maybe some blood orange in the future. We've looked at cherry, the sweet or tart. Let me know how you've been using it, how you've been adding it to your beer, any recommendations you had. I've heard sometimes adding it to the secondary, but adding some chemicals to kill the yeast so it doesn't ferment it and leaves the sweet flavor in it is a possibility, but we want to know. So tell us how you've been working your fruit purees with beers. And until then, let's skip to the next part here where we'll do our tasting. Okay, now welcome to our tasting session for the mango brew we have here today, okay? So I have Joe with me today, and he's going to be going through the process of tasting not only our mango brew, but the mango cart I've mentioned before. Unfortunately, we don't have the just grain bill ready to be tasted yet. We might do that in a later episode, because in bottles, it takes a little bit longer for the beer to sit and get carbonated. So in the keg, we threw it in, we forced carbonate it, we let it sit to chill down, let the flavors absorb into the beer, and then went from there. So Joe's going to be taste testing. Joe does not know which beer is which right now. So there's 2 different samples here. One is our home brew, and the other one is the mango cart beer. And the mango cart beer is out of Los Angeles and is a well-known mango wheat that I personally tried down in Florida, and I love the beer, and that's what this recipe kind of came from. So let's jump a little bit into the recipe. So the first one we have here, let's look at this a little bit. The first one you have, you can still see the head on it a little bit.
Is that this one?
Yep, the first one. Almost the same color if you kind of compare the 2 of them.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out which one's which, just by the color.
So if you look at the 2 of them here, it's almost the same color, okay? So it looks like the second one might have a little bit more carbonation coming to it, but the first one has a little bit of head to it. So let's try the first one here.
Right.
Smell of it. You smell mangoes on it?
Yeah. Oh, I just went in. Oh, it's so good.
So the first one, how would you describe that kind of?
Well, first of all, I love mangoes. I'm very excited for this. So excited for this testing.
So the first one looks like it leaves a nice ring on the top too. You can see around the outside there.
All right, I mean, definitely mango-y. Is that a word?
But do you get a punch of mango, or do you get more of a back flavor?
I wouldn't say it's a punch of mango.
Okay.
But it's a good, subtle flavor of mango.
Okay. And that's part of the process.
That's what I want in my beer. I don't want a punch of anything.
Yeah, that's true. Too much mango puree is like more drinking a Slurpee compared to a beer flavor with it.
That's perfect.
So this first one is the same almost color, lightly carbonated.
It's good.
Okay, let's go with
really
the
good.
second one here. So the second one, it looks like the head kind of disappeared on this one here.
Mm-hmm.
But you can kind of see the carbonation bubbles coming up through it.
Yeah.
Again, it's the same color as the first one. When looking to compare them, maybe a little bit less.
It's brighter, I think.
A brighter?
It's like the same color, but I think it's a little brighter.
Okay. So let's do the second one.
All right.
Smell the second one.
Oh, I didn't smell it. See, this one tastes different. Okay, this one has less of a smell than the first one.
Okay, less of a smell.
Do you agree?
I think it has more of a mango smell. So when I'm getting this one, I think this one has a little bit more of a richer mango smell. The other one was more light, like a floral kind of mango, but this one I think has more richer.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the second one?
Are you gonna be offended if I'm like, Okay, they're both. This one's not bad. I like this. Hang on, I need more time with it.
That's fine. So, the second one, you can also see a little bit of, I hate to say particles, but it looks like the mango is kind of in isolation in the beer itself. So just to compare the two of them, one of them's a little bit more clear, where the one on the right, our second one, has a little bit more floatness to it, items floating in it. So just to compare it.
Okay, I think I've come to a conclusion.
Okay, so what I'll say first is...
Wait, can I just say something?
Yes.
So, my initial reaction wasn't a bad one, but this is like more of a natural mango flavor. I feel like this first one we had was more of like a artificial mango. I guess that's where I was going with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
Okay, that's all.
Okay.
So it's good. They're both good. That's why I was just like, wow, they're different.
Different kind of tone that you're getting out
Very
the flavor.
different mango to me.
Okay, so which one do you enjoy more?
I would drink both, but I'm a mango person. I love mango.
Okay.
I would personally see it depend. Like, I would personally prefer actually the artificially flavored one, and to me it seems like the first one tasted more mango-y.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go with the first one we tried.
Okay, so you like number one over number two.
If I had to go strictly based off of like artificial mango flavor, yes. But if I was like, ooh, I want a freshly, like, I feel like this is yours because I can tell that this is like homemade mango flavored.
So you're gonna say number two is
Number two is Hop Time Brewing Company.
Okay. So the truth is, number one is ours.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Okay, I swear this is not what wait, really?
So number one is ours. So number one is, you can tell by the color of it. So number two is the mango cart. Mango carts, mango wheat, when poured sometimes you get those mango flakes kind of floating in the beer. It has more of a richer mango flavor to it for when they make it.
So the mango flakes came out of this?
Yes, the mango flakes came out of the can.
Okay, I was also surprised because I thought that was like part of the homemade aspect of it too.
Was the mango?
All right.
Yeah. So the number one is ours. The head retention there was kind of from the green build that we did when we added, I believe, CaraPills or CaraFoam to it, helping with the head retention and around the glass there, as you can see. So, in comparison with the mangoes, I know you said ours had a little more artificial taste, and ours was the puree. And I kind of talked about that earlier, the mango puree. It was 3 pounds of puree that we added into the secondary. Do you think the flavor is stronger on the second one than the first one?
No, I think the flavor is great on the first one.
Okay.
I just noticed that it's a different mango flavor. It's like they're like two different beers to me, honestly.
All right.
And if I really appreciate the mango flavor, and that's why I like the number one. And I really thought that number one was
number one.
So I was like, oh wow.
So our beer, as I talked about before, had a little mishaps through the process. So Joe doesn't really know, so I'll talk us through right now.
I don't know anything about
so this beer was supposed to be up at 5.5%. Aim high, unfortunately we got a lot of it lower on this beer. So the Mango Cart beer by Golden Roads, I believe it is a 4%er, so it's very light. It's a light beer, light sipper in the summer. Ours came out almost at 4%. I think came out at 3.9. So it's a little lighter beer. So when you're thinking about a beer and you hear 3.9, 3.8, anything below 4, you sometimes question, like, is it actually a beer? Like, it's still fermented. There's still alcohol in there. It's just not, you're not going to get the same effects as an 8% or a 9% or other beers we've done in the past. So we've had a couple mishaps with this beer. So the first thing is with the grain build. So when we put the grain in, we put it at too high of a temperature. So typically you aim for the 150s area when you put the grain in. We actually end up a little bit higher with our water temps, so we we're in the 160s. So when that usually happens, you end up having more protein that's unfermentable. So going into our fermentation process, instead of fermenting down to the 110 area, we stayed up in the 1020s. So the 1020s was very high, very still sweet, which was fine. And then adding that mango puree into the secondary made it even more sweeter. And then that fermented down again, I think to 1014, I think we were looking at. So the mango puree kind of fermented out. And I think that's kind of the difference here. I think Mango Cart might be using their mangoes more in the end of the process, so that you get a really pungent, sweet flavor for it, where ours is a little fermented out, so the sugars are gone, but the flavor is still there. So that's the kind of difference for our beer there. So a couple mistakes happened in the process, but I think Joe said that
I couldn't have told.
So number one is our beer here. So mangoes messing with purees, I asked before. Let me know what you've done with them. If you've added them to the primary, if you've added them to the secondary, or if you add them to kegging. We've thought about adding to the kegging process, and we're looking to do a Kolsch, and I know our blood orange Kolsch was one we did previously, and I think Joe's tried it before. And typically we added sometimes to the kegging, or we added to the secondary, but we've thought about doing kegging and adding a floating dip tube to make sure that the beer is taken and not the full puree that settles at the bottom. So let us know your experiences with purees, but that's pretty much a wrap here for our mango wheat. Coming up soon, we will be working on a new recipe, looking to do an Imperial IPA, which we're going to hit a high ABV on that. So stay tuned to our channel, and we appreciate you coming.